Well, hello everybody and welcome to the July Spark session. It is a fun topic today. It's all about finding the elusive donors. Well, more specifically, how to build your lists and some other specs on size of lists, those sorts of things. This is a topic after my own heart because Spark Freedom started from 0 supporters. We had like one person who was interested in helping us get going. And as a young organization, when you wander into this world of fundraising and developing lists and developing relationships, I think one of the hardest things is that brick wall that you hit when you're like, okay, so where do I find the people? I don't know where to find the people. So today we have two guests on, Jim Johnston from the Mercatus Center and Rosann Garber. How do I say your last name? Brioche?
It's Brodie. Most people
Brodie?
know me as Rosann Garber, which is
just
fine.
Rosann Garber. Okay,
yeah,
I should have checked that before.
Yeah.
So they're here, and she's from Precision Lists, and they're both going to share with us some of the insights they've developed over the years of helping people. Today we'll start out by letting each of them talk and talk just about their unique perspectives, and then we're going to dive into questions from you, our viewers. So if you have not submitted a question to me in advance, that is okay. You can just submit it. There's a Q&A button that you can see on your screen. Just submit it there, and I'll go through those after they talk. So let's start with Rosann. Rosann, why don't you tell us your perspective on this topic?
Okay, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. First time participant, thank you. I'm here today because I'm a list broker. And for those who don't know what a list broker does, I'm an agent. I'm an agent who works with you, the mailer, to secure names and addresses for your mailing. I'm just like a real estate agent, real estate broker. When you want to buy a house, you say to someone, I want a house with 3 bedrooms, with 2 bathrooms, and I want it to be near a subway station. And that real estate broker knows where to find those homes. And they come back to you and present to you, here are the homes that fit in your criteria. And I do the same thing, but with mailing lists. You say to me, I want to do a mailing, and these are the types of people that I believe will appeal, would want to give to my organization. And I go into the list marketplace, and I come back to you, and I say, here are the lists that I believe would work for your appeal. And together we would discuss what they are, and then you would give me the go to order list for your mailing. And so that's what a broker is. I'm basically the middleman between you and the list. Sometimes organizations do great with list brokers, but some organizations don't need them at all. And I am not sure about Spark Freedom, but I work with organizations sometimes, or I speak to organizations sometimes, who are new and they have no names at all, and they're starting from scratch. And those people don't need brokers. I think that if you're an organization that's just getting going and you don't have many names, you're a better broker of your own list than I would be for you. And what you do is you think about, what other organizations do I know that would have donors that would fit the type of donors that we want. And you just pick up the phone and you call that person. If you're in development, you might want to call the development person there. You might have the head of your organization call their counterpart at that organization. But just say, hey, we're getting in the mail, and could we have a free use of your mailing list? And you'd be surprised at how many people will help you out. I've seen that happen so many times. And that is one really good way to start off. The other thing is, particularly if you're a state-based group, you know people in your state that have lists that you want to mail, particularly campaign names. You might know the person who ran a campaign for state rep or U.S. Senate or something like that. Call them. Use your personal connections. You don't just have to do that if it's state-based, but I think the state-based groups have a really advantage of knowing firsthand who to contact in their states. If you're a national group and you're looking for names, the same thing. You know people. If you don't know people yourself, somebody in your group is connected. And so that's a really good way to get going. That's how you can start a list. Then you go to a broker who might be able to help you out. But remember, you know best what kind of person, what kind of list that you want to mail. The broker has knowledge, but that broker has to get to know you. Once a broker gets to know you, then the broker can come in and make recommendations. But it's really good for you to already be out testing some lists that you've gotten on your own before you go to work with a list broker. I think that that I could go on about how to secure the list, but I thought maybe that we would let Jim talk about what to do once you have the list, and then I can jump into talking about afterwards.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you so much, Rosann. And Jim, why don't you give us your 5-minute overview, and then we'll run into some questions. Rosann, if you have a follow-up after he talks,
just I probably will.
Wave at me.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm Jim Johnston. I've been doing direct mail with Mercatus Center and a number of other clients, including maybe some of you out there on the phone, or for about 20 years now. Yeah, we, as Rosann laid out, there's a lot of different ways of getting lists. And for prospecting, that's mostly what we're concerned about right now. You want to find the lists that work best for you. Generally, that's going to be lists that are like your organization. So you find the most closest competitors to you, or the most sort of similar organization, and those are going to work the best for you. And then you can also find political donors, campaign donors who give to comparable candidates to what your point of view is. Those can also be good, sometimes to a lesser extent, like magazine subscribers or things like that. Those can also be good as like a third level. But so for your prospecting, what you're going to do next is you're going to decide how much you can mail. What's your budget? Can you spend $10,000 to do a mailing? Can you spend $5,000? Can you spend $20,000? And that's going to determine, how many names you get. And then you say, okay, I'm going to get 10,000 names. And you work with someone like Rosann, or you do it on your own to get enough lists to get you to 10,000. So that may be 5 or 10 different lists. You may get one big organization and one small organization and one candidate list, and 2 or 3 other organizations that And then you're going to work with a mail house, and you're going to send them a list of your lists, and then you're going to get all the lists sent to them, and they're going to go through the lists, and they're going to pull out duplicates. They're going to take out the people who are on multiple lists, which happens a lot. You may get 10,000 names, but then once you dedupe them against each other, it's going to fall down to 6,000 names or 7,000. And you also want to take out your current people. You want to make sure you don't mail your current donors a prospecting list, because sometimes they don't like that. So that's going to knock your list down further. And then then you get your final 6,500 names, or what you say it is. And then you're gonna keep track as well of how each of them responds. That's absolutely necessary. So you have to keep a list of your lists, and you have individual codes on each of the lists to show how they respond. On the reply forms that you send out with your mailings will be a little indicator, like a little code that will say, this indicates it's Heritage Foundation, and this indicates it's Leadership Institute. That way you can know how many of each of them you mailed. You may have mailed 250 Leadership Institute names and 1,000 Heritage names and 500 Mercatus names. Then when you mail them out, then you're going to start getting responses, and you're going to keep track of them in your Excel spreadsheets and your databases and things like that, and you're going to see how each of your lists responded. And then the surprising thing to a lot of people is how few people respond. I mean, if you get 1% of, your 10,000, you mail 10,000 names, if you get 100 responses, you're doing well. So it may be that you get 50 responses out of 10,000. So it's like, oh, it seems terrible, but it can actually be pretty good as long as the people give enough money. The other thing to bear in mind is you're probably going to lose money when you do prospecting, and you have to budget to do that. If you're making back 75 cents on the dollar you spend, actually you're doing well with prospecting. You know, you make back 50 cents on the dollar, well, less so, but it can still be okay over time. And if you're making money on prospecting, hey, that's great. You should do more prospecting. So sometimes we see people who actually make $2 for every dollar spent on prospecting, and that just means they need to mail a lot more. And other times it comes through and it's like 30 or 40 cents on the dollar, and you're like, that's not so great. So you want to make some changes. You know, you want to do different lists, or you want to get a different letter, or you want to get a different letter signer, or a different topic, or anything, you know, like that. So you don't want to just keep wasting money if you're only making 10 or 20 or 30 cents for the dollar spent. You can only use them one time as well. You know, you get one-time use of, say, Mercatus Center list, and you have to make sure that date is okay with them, and then you mail it on the given date. Then, you know, once you get the responses, they become part of your house file, and those are your donors over time. And that's when you start making the money, because the people that you mail have given to you, they've expressed an interest, you know, they're interested in what you have to say, and they, you know, probably not all of them, but at least more than half of them will probably keep giving to you. And that's where you should start making a nice profit pretty quickly, because, you know, you mail 100 donors, it's only going to cost you, you know, $500, $300 or $400, whatever it is to mail, but it's a very small amount. And then if they start giving, you know, you make $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 off of that mailing, you know, then, you know, it's obviously profit. So that's what you're trying to get, and you're trying to build that list up over time. And the more prospecting you mail over time, the bigger your house file will get. And then you can just keep mailing those people. You make a mailing calendar to say, we want to mail 6 times a year, 7 times a year, something like that. And each time you should be making more money. You should be getting to know your donors better, you know, visiting with them, talking to them on the phone, finding out which of them have a higher capacity to give. So that's where all the long-term growth comes in. But it all starts with getting the right lists, mailing them, keeping track of your results. And I think that's probably about my time there. So, but I'd be happy to ask any other, you know, answer any questions people may have.
Well, they are already starting to roll in, Jim. So that's
Okay.
2 from the Facebook live feed. I had 5 in advance, so we're doing well. Again, remember, if you want to submit a question and you're watching this on Facebook, write it in the comments, and then somebody will fill it into our question and answer tool here. If you are watching this through the Zoom meeting, then just click on that Q&A folder. Well, it's a folder looking thing for me. It's a button. It should be up towards the top of your screen, and just ask your question. And Rosann, you said you wanted to.
I just wanted to add, since the title of this is Building Your File, I think it's important to know that you have to keep prospecting if you want to build your file. So once you have names that have contributed, then Jim takes them on and mails a house file to them, and you own those names, but those names on your house file only grow if you continue to prospect. Yeah. And so I just wanted to add that oftentimes people mail once or maybe twice, and they don't understand why their file isn't growing. And the reason is you have to invest in prospecting and acquisition mail. You need to keep doing it over and over. And, you know, a list may not work for one appeal, but it might work for another. So I always say, don't discount a list one time because you mailed it, it didn't work.
Right.
You know, and it's the same thing with your creative. Just because a package didn't work, you know, maybe you want to tweak it and try it another time down the road. It's always good, if you can afford it, to have several prospect mailings going at the same time, so you can test lists and also offers.
Okay.
Just wanted to add that.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I have a very tangible, practical question that's come in, and it looks like it's from Facebook, so I'm not sure who sent it, but it says, what is the going rate for list rentals? How do you know if you're getting a good rate?
I would say, I didn't turn off something here and it's buzzing. I would say that a list if a list works, it's worth it. there was back in the day when all rental lists cost $75 per thousand, and now we rent lists that are $150,000 per thousand. And you know what? A lot of those are worth it. Many lists in our marketplace that we're working in are exchanges. And so there's really no cost to the list. There's usually a processing fee by the broker. And I recommend that as much as possible. So there's no rental fee per se. But the price of the list is all over the place. I doubt you're going to get a good list for less than $100 a thousand. I'd be really surprised. But I would say don't be scared off by higher rates. I would ask a broker, or I would work with somebody who might know the list before I would pay $150,000.
Yeah,
So,
I'm gasping at that, but
I know you are, but I can tell you that I yesterday ordered 2 lists at that price.
oh, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I usually tell people that the list cost itself is usually not the big bulk of a mailing. That's not the make or break point. The quantity and the cost per piece of the printing and the mailing are actually where the big cost comes in.
Uh-huh.
So that's what to pay more attention to, I think, when you're prospecting.
That's good to know.
And I appreciate you saying that.
So here's a question from a young organization. They say, what size effort should my nonprofit make to acquire 100 donors? How much will it cost and how long will it take? That's from Jason in South Carolina.
Well, as I was saying with the response rates, you over time we shoot for like a 1% response to prospecting. So in theory, to get 100 donors, you have to mail, 10,000 names. It may be that you have super duper success right off the bat, and you have it comes faster, so that happens. But sometimes it comes slower too. Then of course there may be other ways you have of getting those initial 100 donors, through personal visits or just people you meet in an event, or friends and family who eventually start to help you build a list. But strictly through prospecting, you're probably going to mail about 10,000 names. And then the cost of doing that, that could be $2 a piece. It could be $3 a piece if you do a high dollar direct mail, which is the kind that I usually do with my mailings, which is to say, you're doing a nicer first class postage, you're doing first class reply forms or BRE, not sure on that. So it goes back and forth, and you're asking for $100 or $1,000 or $10,000 or $25,000. Sometimes people give that much. So you're not asking for $1 or $5 or 10 up to 100. That would be low dollar direct mail, which is actually the bulk of direct mail is low dollar. But most of the organizations in the freedom movement, the state think tanks and Mercatus Center, places like that, have a high dollar strategy, which is to say it's lower quantities overall, but higher asks, so you get more bang for the buck.
So on that note, I'm going to ask both of you this question. Is it like, why would an organization choose a high dollar strategy versus a low dollar strategy in direct mail? Like the $1 ask versus the $100 ask.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on what your goal is.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah, go.
Yeah.
So the answer is, it depends on what your goal is. I work with people who have a low dollar program and a high dollar program, and the purpose of the low dollar program really is to identify donors that they can upgrade once they, say someone gave $25, they want to upgrade them into someone who could give over $100. So to me, what are your goals? Some people like to have a low dollar program because it doesn't cost as much, and their purpose of mail isn't necessarily to raise a lot of money or to get big donors, but to get their issue out there, or let people know what they're doing. So it depends on who you are to what you need. Jim and I work with a lot of the organizations that do mainly high dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my clients do both.
Right. So they have an integrated approach. And Jim, what's your thought on that?
Well, normally, the reason why Mercatus Center and groups like us historically did the high dollar is because we learned from, say, Leadership Institute, who pioneered it way back when, is that, you know, you get more bang for the buck. You can run a program internally. You know, you can do it in-house when you're getting back 100 or 200 donations, you know, every week or so. And those donations are $100 and $500, and, you know, you can handle it in-house. You don't have to take it outside to a vendor to handle it for you. A lot of times with the low dollar, you got to have it outsourced, because it can be such a high quantity coming in, you know, at just a huge quantity of mail will just be pouring in, and you just can't do it yourself. Also because, you know, you cut out that initial layer of, okay, you got those $10 to $25 donors. You're trying to get the cream of the crop of them, you know, but you just cut out that initial step, and just know that you're going to invest more early on to get those higher dollar people. So that's the main reason why people have been doing that over time. And, you know, and we have seen the good bang for the buck from the high dollar. You know, but then a lot of times we tried to experiment with it and to say, okay, maybe we should try a low dollar, you know, to try that, getting the low dollar people in and then moving them up. So sometimes you have success with that. You know, I haven't had the greatest success with that myself. Maybe because a lot of the groups that, like in the state freedom groups, or, you know, places like Mercatus Center, are a little bit more highbrow, if you will, a little more, you know, a little more intellectual versus emotional, if that makes any sense, which the high dollar approach may be better for.
Oh, I can see that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rosann.
I was just going to add also that there's a difference in a person who gives $25 and a person gives $100. And when you get them on your file, this is the concern. When you prospect and you got a brand new person onto your, you know, that gave to you, you want to then send them a house mailing. And if they get that house mailing and it's not something they're interested in, because, you know, they gave to a low dollar appeal that might have had like a petition in it or something, and you send them a more highbrow, I'd like that high dollar house file, that it doesn't match. And so so it's hard to convert the low dollar people to a high dollar. And if that's who you are, then that's who you need to stick with. I've had organizations that need to have a different type of appeal to the low dollar people in their file than the high dollar people in their file, because they're different types of people.
Well, and that comes to the point, right? Your messaging strategy has to be in place for your mailing to work, and it has to not shock them by going off the message. That's what that sounds. From the marketing person on the call, it sounds like you went into the marketing. Thank you for taking us there. Okay, so how likely is it that a list renting organization would provide a lift letter for the renter? Is that something that is often on the table or requested? That's a very question, whoever sent that one in.
Yes, and I'm not even sure exactly what it is. Someone's ordering a list and they are asking if they have to provide the lift letter?
Yes.
I would say the short answer is yes, but it's not always required.
Okay.
When I broker a list and an organization is, you know, says, here's my mailing piece, and I have to provide it to the vendor that I'm getting the list from, I always need the letter, the reply, any inserts, and the outside envelope, and that would include a lift letter. And you know, you're saying this is what I'm mailing, so you might as well include everything. So the short answer is yes.
Oh, did the question mean to have a lift letter from the organization whose list it is to introduce the new?
Maybe that's the question.
Is that what it meant?
I don't, you know, it was a little confusing. So we could answer both. Let's back up. For the people who don't know what a lift letter up is, let's start there. What's a lift letter?
Well, a lift letter is you have an introductory letter on top of your main letter. So it may be from a politician or a big name businessman or a big name celebrity. to say, hey, check out this letter inside. You know me from my Fox News show, or you know me from business or the news or whatever else. Here's an organization I think you'll like. I work with them on this issue. Please check out what they have to say. And then you have a letter inside it from your internal person. So sometimes you do it that way. So it's like a two letter inside the envelope. Other times you have a letter that's just from an outside signer. You have Rand Paul or Tom Coburn or whoever sign a full letter on your behalf. And other times you have it's completely internal signer. Morris McTeague from the Mercatus Center, and we've done him up for years and years and years. Just a letter from Morris McTeague, the guy from New Zealand. So basically, you want to get your letter opened. You want to make sure people are going to open that up, because they get so much mail. Most of it goes in the trash, and that's why you get a 1% response for doing good. Is because you got to cut through the clutter. You got to get noticed, and having a cover note signer that they like or have heard of is a good way of getting opened. Having an interesting story that jibes with what is on people's minds is another way. That's when you can do an internally signed letter, if it's a good issue or a good story that gets people interested.
Okay. So that explains why the president is constantly sending me email, right? Because I know it's from the president personally every time that happens.
Of course it is.
Well, when you get to House file, I usually tell them to do the organization head too, like the president of the organization or whoever it is, just to keep consistency of message and signer, so people get to know that person.
Okay, I got a follow-up on that question. It says, yes, that is correct. If I'm going to rent a list, I imagine having a lift letter from the organization providing that list would be helpful. And I'd want to have that negotiated as part of the list purchase. And I think what they were asking is, should I provide a draft to them of what we're hoping they will write?
Yeah.
So, for example, I think, apologize.
No,
I think what they're saying is, if they want to use, I'll just say Mercatus's list, they want someone from Mercatus to have a lift letter in their package. And I will tell you, Jim, you tell me, I don't know that that's ever happened. I don't think people are inclined to do that.
Yeah, I would not be inclined to do that as a list owner. There's always exceptions. If it's like somebody, like a group that's linked to your group. So sometimes there's an organization, and under it is another organization. So maybe the head of the top organization can write something for the lower organization. That's part of it. I've seen that and done that before, but it's very rare. You wouldn't really want to have, in some cases, as the second organization, you wouldn't really want it in some ways, because you don't want to confuse people. It would be confusing to have, big organization tells you about little organization. So are they given to big organization, or are they given to little organization? So it gets confusing.
And I might want to add, I'll use Heritage as an example, because they are so specific about it. If you were to rent or exchange a Heritage list, your mailing, your copy and your mailing nowhere can mention the words Heritage Foundation, nor anyone who works at Heritage Foundation. Now, they're very open, they're very generous in exchanging and renting their names, but they do have that in there. And I believe that a lot of organizations are like that. Not all of them, because I often see my clients' names in other organizations' mailings, and they're fine with the mention of it. But as far as having a lift letter, I'd be surprised if that got approved. I'm not even sure it's the broker's position to be able to get that approved. I think somebody from organization to organization would have to do that.
Yeah, I know in our case, we have done that one time with a list rental from another organization.
Yeah.
But we work with them all the time on policy projects, and it was, the CEO was kind enough to write a cover letter, and let us mail to their donors. So it was, so that has happened, but that was all worked out before lists were rented to begin with.
Right. And I'm familiar with an organization that lets everyone use their list at least one time. You know, they're just open to whoever needs, you know, you're getting going, they want to do that. And the reason, actually I can think of two, because one of them many years ago that was brand new, no names. I mean, they'd been around town a long time, but they never did direct mail. So they just called everyone they knew and said, can we use your file? And as it turned out, they had a lift letter from one of the organizations, but they were allowed to do that to get going one time.
Right.
So.
Right. And I can understand you want to keep your message simple in fundraising. You don't want to confuse, like, am I supporting this one or that one? Because that can mess everybody up in a.
Well, I think another thing to bear in mind is that so a lot of times people are really proprietary about their lists. You know, they really want to protect it. They really want to protect it. What I often tell people is, oh man, those people are on everybody's lists already. You know, you don't have to get too wrapped up on that. You know, it does make sense to protect your list. You do want to do that, but it's not, the chances are those people are already on 15, 20 other lists. So, you know, so that's why exchanging lists is a great idea for everybody. The more people are doing well in the mail, the better for everybody. Mm-hmm. And so I've often said that sometimes it seems like we're relying on the big guys, say Heritage or whoever, to find some new people and get them into the mix, you know, so to break in some political people, you know, political only donors, and get them kind of in the mix. Mm-hmm. And then they start filtering through the process and become policy donors. And then the groups like Mercatus Center or LI or, you know, others like that can start using the Heritage lists, and they kind of get some of those people. And then, so it all helps each other, you know, and the bigger everybody's lists are getting, the better, because that means, you know, if Leadership Institute wants to mail the Mercatus names, if the Mercatus list is bigger, then Leadership Institute has more to draw from, and then the Mercatus list does better for the leadership, and so everybody's happy. You know, it's like the better it goes for one group, the better it is for the other group, because then they can use the lists again, and it just keeps growing. Yeah, but as everybody's lists are shrinking, then it starts to be hard. You know,
this relates actually to another question that came early on that I felt I couldn't ask out of the chute, and it was, why would a competing organization rent or share their list?
Yeah, pretty much that reason. I mean, you know, it may be that, like, I know it's like in some of the states or something, there may be like a, you know, kind of more of a fierce rivalry there. Whereas on the national level, I don't know that it's so much a fierce rivalry amongst, you know, the different groups. It's more like everybody kind of has a niche. You know, you can think of a few organizations who are just really, really competitive with each other. But again, that's probably the best lists. So if they can get past that to know, okay, you use ours and we use yours, and, you know, we'll both benefit, that should be great for everyone. So, you know, I can think of a few cases where just for internal political reasons, they don't want to mail it, but those are pretty rare.
Yeah. And Rosann, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. It benefits everyone to say yes to everyone else. And I even work with two organizations who are in the exact same marketplace, and they do exchange lists with each other because they both have a different take on their issue. And so they feel like it only helps that they exchange with each other, and they exchange with other people. And believe it or not, the same lists don't work for both groups. But yeah, so and that you just have to get past it. And the only time I ever see people go, you know, these people can't mail my list, it usually is a personality thing more than anything else.
Yeah.
Okay, so be nice to everybody. Be excellent to each other. That's what we need to learn here. Okay, so I have one in from Facebook from Matt in Canada, and he is wondering, Rosann, if you do any Canadian lists.
I do not. I have never done that, but I can put him on to a really good person who does.
Okay. Well, Matt, we'll hit you up on follow-up on that one.
Yes.
I have his email, Rosann, so
great.
Because I know it was a Facebook direct message. Exactly who that is. Okay, next question. How do you know if a list will work prior to renting? Are there percentage estimates? And this actually relates to another one, which is, how do I forecast that a certain list will be good from Bob? So how do I forecast if a list will be good, and how do I know the likelihood that something doesn't work before I spend my $150,000 on 1,000 names?
Okay. You do not know for sure. Nothing's granted. You don't know if, something's going to happen in the news that everyone's mail's going to tank. You just do not. There are no guarantees to anything. But you do know based on working with someone who can give you some background on the list. This is, work for similar type organizations, or, I've seen success with it with this kind of mailing. I mean, you can only go by that. No one's looking to make $150. It doesn't, it's not a lot of money anywhere. So everyone's looking for stuff to work so that there is more mail in it, not for a one shot. So I don't know anything to tell anyone to guarantee any result. I can only go by experience and saying that I've seen it work before, or I, have knowledge of it working. Lists are valued by what they can get in the marketplace. And that list that's 150, 1,000, it used to be less. But what has happened is more people want to mail it, and so it's worth more. That would be my answer, Jim.
Oh, yes.
What would you?
Over time, if you have someone working with you who knows the market, a list broker like Rosann, or consultant person who kind of knows the market, you kind of the groups that are similar, the like groups will be the best respondents. And then so I usually tell people the more obscure group the better, because for you if you're just starting out, because you're pretty obscure. So if Mercatus wants to find more lists like that, and you can think that the response that a Mercatus type group for another Mercatus type group will be a certain level, maybe 80 cents on the dollar. And then looking at history, you can say, okay, and when we mail to a bigger group like Heritage, maybe more like 50 cents on the dollar, because you're mailing to a larger group who maybe not know you as well. And then you can also think that, like, when you mail the political donor lists, that it's maybe closer to 50 cents on the dollar if you're lucky. A lot of times it's even lower. But is it worthwhile anyway, because you get a lot of $1,000 donors off of that list? Maybe it's a small responses, but you get historically, that there are a lot of good big donors who come off of it, who are good for you later on. And so those are all the kind of things to bear in mind. And also, when you get the list, you get a sheet about each list, from your list broker, like Rosann, which would say usage of this list is this. These groups have used this list, XXXXX. Mm-hmm. And so you see a whole bunch of people who are sort of similar to your group have used that list before. Then that should say, oh, well, it must be pretty good. Let's, or continuation usages. That's another term.
Yes, it does.
Like to say, like, yeah. So if they're using it a lot, okay, well, it must be really good. So it's definitely worth a try. But again, it's always a gamble. Again, like Rosann said, something bad can happen in the news, and then everybody's mail goes splat. You just don't know. So you got to know that you have money to invest in a gamble to begin with.
Yeah, it reminds me of this time I put my house on the market for sale, and the very next day, all the stock markets crashed. A list can do that. You can do the equivalent of that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I was in the business on 9/11, and the mail stopped.
Just stop the mailing. I don't care if it's printed already.
Yeah.
Why spend the money on postage at that point?
Exactly.
But the key is to, no one can guarantee the result, but the key is to have knowledge in advance. And so you feel confident going into the mailing that it's going to work. You got to have a good list, but you also have to have good copy. You got to have a good package. I really feel like it goes hand in hand.
Yeah. I'm not surprised to hear that a good list that has your targeting and a good message that is targeted at that list go hand in hand at all. Okay, so I'm going to ask you both if you want to sum up the best way to approach building lists and direct mail prospecting in 3 steps. What would those 3 steps be? I know, and I'm going to tell mine first because that gives you a chance to madly think about what your 3 things are right now. So I would say the first and most important thing is to set your goal in advance and know what you're going for before you start. draft and evaluate and hone your message to make sure it's targeted correctly, and then make sure that your message matches your targets and that you have a stewardship process in place so that when you get the names, it's not just like, thanks for the money, bye. Those would be the ways I think it's really important to work your lists. However, I'm not the expert in the room. So who wants to start? I'll let you choose. Who's ready to go?
Rosann?
I don't even know what to say. I mean, I think it's really important to work with someone who is knowledgeable about the list. And so I guess that would be one of mine. Mm-hmm. And even if you're doing it yourself in-house, that you at least talk to people who have ordered lists before, so that you know that your list is going to be one that will work for your organization. Is that what you're asking me?
You know, the simple boil it down advice that you give people, and that sounds good. And Jim, what's your simple boil it down advice for people moving into this direct? They may already be doing direct mail prospecting. Yeah. So I'm looking at the attendee list.
Yeah, I think a lot of them are.
Yeah. So
yeah,
what's your advice for success on the whole direct mail prospecting?
Well, I usually tell them to, first of all, don't be afraid to try it. You know, just do it. You know, don't worry about the exact perfect time or the exact perfect everything, you know, but rather just commit to doing something and see how it works and learn from that. And if it completely bombs, well, you know, it happens. Everybody bombs sometimes, but you can learn something from it, you know, and if it really does great, be prepared to follow up, you know, be prepared to mail more. But know that you gotta invest early. So sometimes it's good to have a chunk of change set aside. You know, sometimes for a group just starting out, you can get a grant from one of your foundation supporters or a big supporter of yours who knows the importance of expanding your donor base, you know, and they'll give you, hey, here's $20,000 grant, go and, you know, prospect with it. You know, you can ask them specifically for that. And so sometimes you have a good donor like that who knows that. And then okay, I'm going to invest $20,000 over the course of this next 6 months in my prospecting, or in just one big fell swoop in my prospecting. But you got to know that, again, you're going to probably lose some money up front, but then over time you'll build up and you start making money pretty quickly off of your house file that you've built. And you have to be prepared, like you said, to keep mailing. You got to have a plan for what you're going to do once you get those people in the door. Because I've seen people who go through all the trouble of doing prospecting and then don't do anything with it. You know, They don't, and it's like, okay, well, why bother having the people? You got to keep in front of people or they forget about you.
And thank them.
Only your most recent donors are useful anyway. Yeah.
I threw that in. Don't forget to thank people for their donations.
Yeah, thank them first. Give them a call if they're, you know, if they give above a certain level. You know, send people to visit with them, get to know them. That's all. It's all important parts, and it all helps.
That makes sense. So when an organization has pretty much exhausted free market sources of, you know, partner organizations for lists, where do they go from there? That's a question I think a lot of people are on this wondering, okay, so we've kind of got this list trade or the exchange with our, you know, organizations who are competitive but friendly. We've got that under control. Now what? Now where do we go? Because we're still not building our list fast enough.
One thing is that your broker will have a list of your exchange balances. And so, you know, Heritage and Mercatus will be, Heritage owes 500 names in this 100 to 999 bracket. You know, Mercatus owes 273 names in the 1,000 and up bracket. So just because you mail it once doesn't mean you can't keep mailing it. So you can mail it as often as they'll let you. You know, you don't want to go too crazy with it, but I mean, if it's making money or if it's doing really well, you can mail it every 2-3 months if they'll let you. You know, depending on the balance. You know, they're not going to want to get too far out of whack. Like, say, I don't like to let it go past 2 usages. You know, I don't want to get more than, say, 5,000 in the hold of somebody.
Right.
And you know, if they come back to us, but they owe us 5,000, then I'll say, no, not this time. You know, come back once we've reduced the balance. Mm-hmm. And the better that your mail does for other people, the more likely it is they'll say yes to you. So I'm more willing to cut some slack to somebody who I know is a great list for us than if we mailed it before and it was terrible. And I'm like, I'm probably not going to use that list again.
Right.
So, and I don't want to keep it going. But for those groups who are closest to you and most like you and everything else, it should be working for both sides. And so you can keep mailing them a few times a year. But to more immediately answer the question, yeah, once you got past that first tier, then you got the second tier, which are the big guys, Heritage, Potato, maybe AFP. So the groups that have much larger lists than, the 1,000 or 2,000 lists.
Right.
So that's the second tier. And the third tier is combined political givers.
Okay.
You want to get one from the broker can help you find those lists, and they are combined lists of political donors. So it's not people who are just, I gave to one candidate, but rather people who give them multiple candidates, and multiple conservative or liberal, free market, what have you, candidates. So those were, that's the third tier, but those would be much bigger. That's a much larger. Then there's also list sharing places like Wyland Direct. So y'all may know about them. That's a whole other story, but that's a different way of getting names. Basically, you put your names in a big pot and then you can draw them out. You draw out other names from the pot. That's good. And then your subscriber lists. And once you get past those, I'm stumped. That's pretty much the market, I think, as far as I've ever seen.
What do you think, Rosann?
He went right through them. I was waiting to see if he was going to add the Wylands of the world. But yes, once you have mailed numerous times all the exchange files, whether they're small or large, then the next thing are the rental files. And there's these big files that people have created of donors to lots of organizations or campaigns and stuff like that. Now, my thing about that tier of names is they tend to do fairly well if you have a state group. And they don't do quite as well on the national, but you still can mail them, but you need to know who your source is. It's really important for me as a broker. I know the people who have those lists, and I therefore know what's in them.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I say, if people won't tell you, then you don't need to be mailing them.
Yeah.
I don't want, I quit mailing any lists that the description is donors to conservative and Republican issues and organizations. They believe in lower taxes and strong national defense. Don't we all? Anyway, but so definitely that. I am personally very high on Wyland. I think that getting involved in Wyland is great. They only work our side of the aisle. They understand us. They're part of the movement, but they're not for everybody either. It works some places and doesn't work for others. But that's really that's what we have now. And Jim mentioned subscribers, but I don't do those anymore. I mean, on occasion.
Yeah, it's pretty iffy. It's pretty iffy on if those work. Occasionally, sometimes those will work. And if you're feeling like you're a little gamble, then the subscriber list. But only for those few magazines, national.
Yeah. Right. We haven't had good luck with them either.
Yeah.
At one time, I used to mail Wall Street Journal mail subscribers at home, and even that, no more.
Well, that's good to know. Well, Jim, Rosann, thank you so much for making time today. We will have, for those listening or those listening in the future, we'll have this out next Tuesday or Wednesday on our blog with the recorded version and a summary. It's great to be able to tap into knowledge of people like you as we navigate I think building lists are some of the most frustrating things for a lot of, fundraisers starting out wondering, okay, now where do I go? So thank you so much for demystifying that for us. Everybody viewing right now, our next Spark session is August 17th at 12 Eastern, and it's about crisis communications. So we hope you can make that. Have a great day.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.